Record. Okay, here we go. Thank you for joining this virtual presentation today. As you can see, I'm in outer space. Professor Claude here. We are going to talk about a fun subject and we're going to go straight to the content because that's why you're here. And let's talk about ourselves. Let's talk about who we are as individuals in the environment of management and leadership. And this series of conversations, chapter 10, chapter 11, and chapter 12, and I'm going to split them up like that in shorter segments, is going to be all about leadership. And I love how we're starting off with understanding individual behaviors when it comes to understanding leadership. The Some of the learning objectives we're going to talk about, we're going to describe ways to enhance self-awareness and understanding who we are and our impact on those around us. We're going to discuss the importance of job satisfaction and trust so that we can successfully manage how people trust us and how we trust others within our environment. And certainly that leads to employee performance. So, two fundamental things. We're also going to talk about the attribution error, which is a fundamental attribution error, and give some examples of what that is. And maybe you all have experienced that in the past. It's quite interesting how I'm coming back to some of this terminology that I learned a decently long time ago, but it is so relevant. All of these examples that we're going to talk about today in everyday management and leadership practices. We're going to describe personality and how personality impacts. First of all, it's important for us to understand our own personality and how that works within our environment, but also understand the personalities of other people around us and the differences in personalities to just know why people behave the way they do, which is quite complicated at times. We're going to talk about emotions today, and we're going to talk about four components of emotional intelligence, which emotional intelligence is extremely important for. Its studies have demonstrated that it increases performance, not only in the individual employee, but certainly in leaders and managers. It increases a lot of different things. EQ is what we're going to call it. And the importance and the impact of how emotional intelligence can shape our relationships with others, and certainly our management and leadership is something that we should definitely know, hold on to, and utilize in our day-to-day lives and in our leadership. We're going to talk about a step-by-step system for managing ourselves, and certainly some of the stress that we create not only in ourselves but also within our organizational environment. In order to build organizational health, we have to be aware of some of the stress variables that are in our environment. So self-awareness. What is self-awareness? I love just explaining the harsh reality that prior to leading other people, we must know how to lead ourselves. And if we cannot lead ourselves well and we can't do it in a manner that is beneficial and fruitful for the people around us, how can we expect to manage others? So we're going to talk about self-awareness and what that means. And the definition of self-awareness is really just being aware of the internal aspects of our nature, our personality traits, beliefs, emotions, and perceptions, and appreciating how our patterns affect other people around us. And candidly, effective leaders just know how to manage themselves and are aware of their feelings, emotions, and how it's impacting the people around us. What's important for self-awareness, or what's good for managers who are high in self-awareness, is they're capable of seeing themselves for really who they are and how others see them. And in order to do that, we have to have a level of humility and solicit feedback from others. And that's one major way. And ask people, how do you see me? How am I acting? Am I doing a good job? How can I improve? I know you love me, so can you help me become better? And listen and be open-minded to what they have to say. And then the other way that we can develop our self-awareness is by using self-assessments. And this is a huge thing that I will always recommend, is that we use self-assessments. Patrick Lencioni has the Working Genius, which is a good one. There's the Enneagram, is an awesome self-assessment. I love to use Wealth Dynamics with my team. That's a great one. And there are a slew of other ones out there where you can truly understand who am I? What do I enjoy? What do I not enjoy? What are some of those strengths and weaknesses? And I encourage you to be very honest in those self-assessments and really look through some of those results and maybe review it with a spouse or a loved one or a coworker. You can do it together. It's a fun exercise. And those two combinations of soliciting feedback and using self-assessments can really help us become more self-aware. So soliciting feedback, what it really does is it exposes our blind spots. And I think we all understand when we drive vehicles what a blind spot is and how those spots can be dangerous. And it's the same with our career. If we have blind spots in our behavior or in our leadership and our management that people aren't making us aware of, and they continue to be blind spots, either uh, people won't take you seriously, they will exploit your weaknesses in manipulative ways, or you'll just go throughout your career not knowing and exposing those blind spots and not having an opportunity to see them, improve upon them, address them, or at least acknowledge that they're there. So that's really what blind spots are. They're attributes about ourselves that people are not aware of and don't recognize that it's a problem. Pretty straightforward. And this is something that I was able to really learn a lot from, not only by reviewing it, but also by improving upon it. And that's self-confidence and something called self-efficacy, which comes from self-confidence. But the importance of being confident, not arrogant, but confident in our styles and who we are, uh, being able to walk into situations with our head held high, knowing what our values are, knowing when to speak, when not to speak, when things infringe upon our values, just general assurances in one's own ideas, judgments, and capabilities. That's what self-confidence is, and great managers are confident managers. And what stems from self-confidence is this term called self-efficacy. And self-efficacy really is this belief in myself that I can accomplish a specific task or outcome or create an outcome. So I am self-efficacious in my ability to talk about leadership, or I am self-efficacious in my ability to get up from my seat and go to the sink and wash a dish. I believe that I can do that. Therefore, I will do it and I'll do it well. I believe in my driving skills. I know that I can get from one destination to the next. I believe that I can run a business. I believe that I can manage a team. I believe that I can stand up on the offensive line of scrimmage as a football player, and I'm strong enough to defend the quarterback from getting sacked. Confidence leads to training, leads to self-efficacy, and self-efficacy is really just knowing that I can accomplish that. And when we believe that we can do that, our tendencies will be to exude or um, demonstrate behaviors in accordance with that confidence and with that self-efficacy. So that's what self-efficacy is. It's really important. And so now we're shifting from self-awareness, self-efficacy, understanding ourselves, getting feedback, seeing our blind spots, and going towards job satisfaction and trust. And you can see how all of those things that I aforementioned there lead to greater job satisfaction and greater organizational commitment and greater trust for the people that are on our team. So when we think about job satisfaction is the degree to which a person finds fulfillment in his or her job. Managers really create environments with a bunch of different variables that we'll talk about later on with leadership. And a manager does have an impact on others' job satisfactions. But first, as managers, obviously, we have to be satisfied with who we are as managers, be confident, and then we can create satisfaction with others on our team. And organizational commitment it is what it sounds like. It's the commitment of an employee of loyalty. This word loyalty. If I get an offer for a job that is 10% higher in pay to go leave here and go work for a competitor, I'm not going to take it because I'm loyal to my organization. Or at least I'll present it to my boss or my superior and allow them to know that, hey, the people over here offering me this position, I would really like a raise. This isn't me coming to you and asking for one, but I just want to let you know I'm loyal to this organization. I'm committed, and I would not leave this organization for just something simple as a 10% increase in my pay. That's organizational commitment. There's something deeper there that keeps our team intact and keeps them staying with the organization. And better believe that if we have a leader that's self-efficacious, that is confident, that understands their blind spots, is capable of leading a team and capable of producing job satisfaction amongst their subordinates or amongst their team, those people in that organization will be more committed to their job and to their company. And then trust. Trust is an important component of organizational commitment. If we don't trust our leaders, if we don't believe that they're doing what's right and what's ethical for the betterment of us and for the betterment of the organization, everything else will crumble if there's no trust. Everything crumbles. It starts with trust. It's actually one of the most important characteristics or competencies or needs of a staff member for their leader is to trust them. And here are just some questions to ask yourself when you think about job satisfaction and you think about the job that you're currently in or a job that you were in. You say, overall, how satisfied are you with your job? Pretty basic on a scale of 1 to 10. And then ask yourself, how satisfied are you with the opportunities to learn new things within your job? How satisfied are you with your current boss? How satisfied are you with the people within your work group? How satisfied are you with the amount of pay you receive? And just answer these questions on a scale of 1 to 5. And if you answer those questions, if you see a lot of ones, a lot of twos, a lot of threes, then likely your satisfaction level is low. But if you look at a question of how satisfied are you with the amount of pay you receive, and you say, you know what, it's a 5, I'm satisfied. I believe that the amount of work that I put in it corresponds with or correlates with the amount of pay that I get. And if that's the case, then likely job satisfaction is higher. So there's a way to score and test these levels of job satisfaction that not only you have, but also some people on your team. And I encourage you with some of the people that you lead to have them fill this out anonymously and to know how satisfied are the people that work in this organization. So perceptions and attributions. So we all know that it's kind of we said one man's trash is another man's treasure. I see 2 squares, you see 3 squares. There's certain things that I'm going to see or that I'm aware of that maybe others are not aware of or they perceive it differently. I think in close relationships we see this more than anything. But a perception, we just have to look at it for what it is. A perception is the cognitive process that people go through, that people use to make sense of the environment by selecting, organizing, and interpreting information from that environment. When you look around, what do you see? Do you think you see the same thing someone else sees? Do you think somebody else's eyes are drawn to something different than yours, and that could create a different perception of the environment? What's important to them? What values do they have compared to the values that you have? That's why perceptions are so complicated because every person perceives things a little bit differently. So perceptual distortions are errors in perceptual judgment. Sometimes people, you may try to do something good or you may try to help somebody, but it's perceived as negative in their perspective, or they don't want the help, or it's looked at, well, I know how to do this. Why are you helping me? And it's almost like you insulted them by offering help. And that's would be an error on their part in a perceptual judgment. So it's important that we see how others perceive things, but it's also important how we perceive things as well. And that adaptability characteristic that we talk about often as leaders is vitally important here. Then stereotyping. Everyone should know what a stereotype is. It's the tendency to assign an individual to a group or broad category and then attribute generalizations about the group to the individual. So we think about basketball players and we say, you know what, a lot of basketball players tend to be tall and tend to know how to jump high. And then somebody comes over to us and says, I play basketball. And we say, oh, wow, you must know how to jump high. That's just sort of something that correlates with playing basketball in my mind. And it's not always the case. Stereotypes are biases in judgment and perception. And then this halo effect is rather interesting when you think about a halo effect. It's the overall impression based on somebody's characteristic, based on one characteristic. So if somebody can deliver a good public speech, that means they must be a good person at home. Or if somebody treats a waitress well or the bellman at a hotel, that must mean that they are really good parents. Like it's that kind of thing when you see a characteristic exuded, one particular characteristic, you're correlating that to a multitude of other things that person possesses or can do just based on that one characteristic of being kind. That must mean that they're also smart, or that must mean that they also know how to do math, whatever it is. So anchoring on that one characteristic to infer that other things in their life are similar is a halo effect. So the perception process, what happens is that we observe something, then we screen it, and then we organize it. So when we observe something, we're just looking around in our environment, we're observing information in the scenes that we have, then we screen it. We screen it with the information of the selecting process. Like what are we seeing? How are we seeing it? And then we organize it. And the organizing is where everyone does it a little bit differently. And this is where the differences in perceptions come into play is this from observe to screen. Observe is pretty straightforward. Screen, it starts to change a little bit. And then organize, it starts to change dramatically from person to person. And organizing is the selected data into patterns for interpretation and response. So what am I seeing? Why am I seeing this? What is this important to me? And what are some characteristics I'm going to focus on? And how am I going to react or respond to what I'm seeing? And what emotions are going to be elicited from what I see or from what I hear? This is the perception process. And it's classic to see these pictures. Sometimes people show you and they say there's a video where people are playing basketball and there's actually a monkey that walks through the scene. And because you're asked to count how many passes the basketball players are passing, you miss the monkey. But some people see it. And then there's these drawings where they say, do you see an old woman or a young woman? I mean, depending on how you look at it and what angle, you're going to see something different. And these are just classic examples of addressing the reality that our perceptions are different than other people's perceptions. And remember, we're talking about leadership. We're talking about understanding ourselves, and then we're talking about understanding others. And we must understand that our perceptions and the people on our team's perceptions are not always going to be the same. It's also why communication is so vitally important. So some of the ways to know your accuracy of your perceptions, you can say to yourself, I look for inconsistencies and seek explanations for them. Is that mostly true or mostly false? You could say I generate multiple explanations for available information. Is that mostly true? Is it mostly false? I make it a point to distinguish facts from opinions. So, do you distinguish facts from opinions? Do you make it a point? Is that mostly true, mostly false? And everybody answers these a little bit differently. Here's one more. I'm well aware of my own biases and values that influence the way that I see people. Again, self-awareness is now playing into our perceptions. And knowing that, just the simple fact that we see things differently based on our values and our biases, is that mostly true or mostly false? Hopefully, after listening to this, you'll say that's mostly true. So, attributions. Attributions are judgments about the cause of a person's behavior. Why did somebody behave that way? Or why did I behave that way? And I'll skip straight to this crazy phenomenon that you'll hear a lot about in stories and certainly in management called the fundamental attribution error is really underestimating the influence of what's happening around a person. This is a different person, a third person, and the factors that are influencing their behavior. So if I do something and I do it well, if I work really hard and I'm capable of getting a bonus, I attribute my behaviors to who I am as a person. I say it's because I'm hardworking and it's because I'm great and I tried really hard and I went out there and sold that client and I did really well. If I didn't get that bonus, if I wasn't able to hit that goal, what I would say about myself, oh, it's because of my boss or my organization. They didn't give me what I need in order to succeed, or it's because it's a bad economy. I would attribute my inability to succeed on external factors. Whereas, and this is the conflict, this is the bias or the error, is that when somebody else doesn't do something right or somebody else didn't hit their bonus, we attribute much more so towards their internal characteristics. We say, oh, it's because they're not hardworking, they don't know what they're doing, or they just are not good performers, as opposed to looking at the external factors that could have influenced their success or failure. So when I do something right, it's because of I'm good. But when I do something wrong, it's because something happened on the outside. When they do something right, it's probably because of something that happened on the outside. Somebody gave that to them because they're lucky. If they do something wrong, it's probably because of who they are as a person. That's the fundamental attribution error. And it's the self-serving bias ties into that, giving too much credit to ourselves for doing well and blaming external factors for failing. So there's a self-serving bias and there's a fundamental attribution error when we look at other people's behaviors. And we talked about what the internal attribution of who I am versus the external attribution of the situation that caused the behavior. So fundamental attribution error, attribution for mistakes and failures. For others, personality qualities is mistakes and failures. It must be the personality qualities. For ourselves, it must be the situation, must be the external environments. Attribution for success. For others, personal qualities, meaning for ourselves, it must be because of our personal qualities, and for others, it must be because of the situation. They're lucky or they're in a good place. So personality and behavior. So personality, it's a word that we throw out a lot and say, oh, a person's personality, and this is just the way they are, or they we may perceive something based on some of their behaviors, and we could be incorporating some of that self-serving bias and those attribution errors and some of those other things that we talked about, but we really don't understand their personality. We're just, I mean, you could understand their personality more if you got to know them more and you asked them some open-ended questions, or you knew a little bit more about what we're talking about. But what's important is that we do understand personality. And these big five personality factors, sort of words that might be a little bit complicated to understand over time, but I think it's really important that we get to know these words in our leadership and our management. And the first one is extroversion. I think we all have heard this word in the past. There's extroversion and there's introversion. So the question is, how much does extroversion play into their personality? How much are they enjoying and getting energy with interacting with others? I love the analogy that talks about an extrovert, and I'm not sure about the validity of this, but it'll hopefully help put it into perspective. Wakes up in the morning with a coin sack that's empty. And as they exchange communication with other people, they're putting coins into their coin sack. They're getting something from their exchanges with others. So throughout the day, they're adding to their energy level based on their interactions with other people. Whereas an introvert wakes up in the beginning of the day with a full coin sack. And as they progress throughout their day and they have communications and a text message and a phone call and a interesting conversation with their mom or dad or an employee or a coworker, they're giving coins out. So at the end of the day, an introvert really has an empty coin sack. So that's hopefully a good analogy that you'll understand the difference between introverts and extrovert personality types. Then we have agreeableness, and how willing are we when someone says something to basically nod our head and say, yeah, I agree, or that's something that I would want to do, or do you kind of go with the flow, versus are you not agreeable? Do you tend to enter into a little bit of conflict, or not nod your head, or maybe say, you know what, I don't agree, or I think we should do this, or um, how agreeable are you? Conscientiousness is a very interesting one. It's really just following the rules. It's being conscientious of those around you. It's making sure you're not really an outlier, that you're following the order and the structure of how things go, and you're sort of doing the things that are expected of you. That's conscientiousness. Emotional stability. Another one here would be neuroticism, of how into ourselves and into our own emotions and into our minds are we, versus how much can we regulate our emotions, and how much do we care for others and are empathetic. So it's emotional stability, also known as neuroticism. Sometimes people in the big five will use that as opposed to neuroticism. I'm sorry, as opposed to emotional stability, they'll call it neuroticism. Openness to experience. How open are you to try new things, to go different places, to do a new project at work? And how open are you? These are the big five personality factors. And each one of them, it's a scale. It depends. Not everybody is like you. And some people really struggle with emotional stability versus they're really good at being agreeable, or they're not agreeable, but they're great with their emotional stability. And some people have a unique combination, which gives them a unique personality. So extroversion, a good question would be, I feel comfortable around people on a scale of 1 to 5. How would you answer that? One being, that's not an accurate way to describe me, or 5 being, that's an accurate way to describe me. Another one for extroversion is I am usually the life of the party. Does that accurately describe you, or does that not accurately describe you? Agreeableness, a question to ask yourself is I am kind and sympathetic. Another good question to ask yourself is, or a statement really that you're agreeing with or not agreeing with, is I never insult people. So if you insult people, then you're not that agreeable. But if you don't really insult anyone, you're likely more agreeable. One last one for agreeable is I have a good word for everyone. You're an encourager. Is that accurate way to describe you, or is that not an accurate way to describe you? Conscientiousness is saying I am systematic and efficient. Are you systematic and efficient? Would you agree that you're systematic and efficient, or would you disagree that you're systematic and efficient? I pay attention to details. A conscientious person pays attention to details. Would you agree that you pay attention to details, or would you disagree that you pay attention to details? This is just, again, the scale of rating yourself and others on these personality characteristics. Neuroticism, that's what we talked about from the other slide, low emotional stability. I often feel critical of myself. Does that accurately describe you, or does that inaccurately describe you? I often envy others. I am temperamental. So if you're temperamental, then likely you are more neurotic. Neuroticism doesn't really envy others. They actually think very highly of themselves. So if you envy others often, you're not as neurotic. I often feel critical of myself. People who are typically neurotic tend to be critical of themselves. Openness to new experiences. I am imaginative. Is that true or is that false about you? I prefer to vote for liberal political candidates. Openness to new experience. I really like art. These are just questions to gauge whether or not really questions or statements to agree or disagree to about your personality type. So we're moving on to attitudes and behaviors influenced by personality. So grit. What is grit? Great lady named Angela Duckworth wrote a book about grit and interviewed Will Smith. And Will Smith had this amazing story to really epitomize what grit was. Is he talked about his competitive nature, and he said, if you and I are on a treadmill together, this is Will Smith, and we are in a competition with one another to see who gets off that treadmill first. He said two things are going to happen. Either I'm going to die on that treadmill, or you're going to get off first. Meaning his grit, his tenacity, he was willing to do whatever it takes, even die on that treadmill to outwork somebody else. So he's basically, that's just a statement of, so a little overly confident, I would say, but it's a statement saying, I have grit, I have fortitude, I have courage under fire. I am not afraid to work really hard. And grit really is defined as passion and persistence for achieving a long-term goal. Grit, great book by Angela Duckworth. I highly recommend it. Authoritarianism. Okay, so power and status differences should exist within organizations. I think we all have probably worked within an organization where we had an authoritarian leader, somebody who just believed that there's a separation in power and a hierarchy here, and it must be honored. I'll never forget some of my work experiences that happened recently. Is the very authoritarian leader did not really believe in empowering other people, was very dictative, didn't really want people to cross him or in any way disagree with him within meetings. He was the boss, he made it known, and the way in which he spoke to people was very harsh and assertive. And he was also, a nice, polished professional, but he was an authoritarian. He believed in authority. And it's a good thing, but it's sometimes not a good thing. I did not take it well in the way in which he treated me and the way in which I saw that he treated others. It's just a difference of leadership styles. But authoritarianism is power and status differences should exist within organizations. And Machiavellianism, there's a interesting Tupac song a long time ago that talks about Machiavelli. But Machiavellianism is acquiring power and manipulating others for personal gain. I have also had interesting experiences in the business world, and this is why I want you you to learn about these things, because if you can see a person really playing the chess match for selfish gain and they're pretty good at it, they're good with their words, they're very smart, and then all of a sudden it's checkmate and you see it, they ha ha ha, and they do it for themselves. They want the power, they want to win, and they acquire power by manipulating others for personal gain. It's Machiavellianism. So the question is that you? Are you authoritarian? Are you a Machiavellian? Like what personality traits do you have that lean towards either one of those, or are you not? The grit questions, I will go back to that. A good grit question to ask, and the question, it's really a statement: is this mostly true or mostly false? The first one says, I often set a goal, but later choose to pursue a different one. Typically, people with grit stick to a goal. So if you don't stick to a goal, you're probably not as high on grit. I have been obsessed with a certain idea or project for a short time, but later lost interest. That's another indication that you don't have a lot of grit because you're not willing to do whatever it takes to achieve that goal. Last one is I finish whatever I begin. And that would be a sign of grit. If you start it, you're going to finish it, no matter what it takes, no matter what hurdles you have to go through. If that's true of yourself, that you finish whatever you begin, that means you are high on grit. Now think about Machiavellianism. This is coercive, manipulative tactics in order to gain power or to win. This is a statement. Do you agree with it or do you not agree with it? If you trust someone completely, you are asking for trouble. Is that mostly true of you, or is that mostly false? Do you believe in trusting people completely, or do you only trust them to a certain degree because you don't want them to come after you and manipulate you in a certain extent? Here's another one. It makes sense to flatter important people. Does it make sense to flatter important people? The vast majority of people are brave, good, and kind. If you believe that the vast majority of people are brave, good, and kind, you're probably lower on Machiavellianism because you believe in other people. You're not trying to manipulate them for your own selfish gain. Last one for Machiavellianism: it is hard to get to the top without sometimes cutting corners. So people high on Machiavellianism believe that that's true, that it is, you can cut corners, and the only way to get to the top is to cut corners and to manipulate people. And some people may say, no, of course you can succeed without having to do that. Problem solving styles. So there's a gentleman, the scientist, it's Carl Jung, had a framework about these 4 different ways, and the Myers-Briggs indicator, about which is just an assessment of basically personality measures and a person's preference. And he classified them in 4 different ways: introversion, sensation, thinking, and judging. So really, he looked at introversion versus extroversion. He looked at sensation versus intuition. He looked at thinking versus feeling, and judging versus perceiving. So he believes that you can't do both of these things at the same time. And these are just problem-solving styles. When you have a problem, do you think about the objective nature of the problem, or do you feel, I feel that this is the right thing to do, or there's harmony here, or you want other people to like you in the decision, versus the fact, hey, he didn't perform well 3 times in a row. This is what the book says, therefore we have to fire him. Versus, hey, he didn't perform well 3 times in a row, but I really like him. He makes me feel good. I want to give him another chance. I think he's good for our company, and I feel that we should keep him around. These are problem-solving styles, and Carl Jung really said you can't do both. It's either introversion or extroversion. It's a sensation versus an intuition, which intuition is more creative thought, creative problem solving, versus sensation is more a little bit more factual, down to earth kind of problem solving. And then, of course, you got judging versus perceiving. So look into these a little bit more. It is a problem solving style, and Carl Jung sort of built this framework. Let's talk about them just a little bit more. Sensation thinking: emphasis, details, facts, and certainty are the action tendencies. Is a decisive, applied thinker, focuses on short-term realistic goals, develops rules and regulations for judging performance. Intuitive thinking prefers dealing with theoretical or technical problems, is a creative, progressive perception thinker, focuses on possibilities using impersonal analysis. And then you have sensation and feeling. shows concern for current real life human problems, is pragmatic, analytical, methodical, and conscientious, emphasizes detailed facts about people rather than tasks. Then you have intuitive feeling, avoids specifics, is characteristic, uh, participative, people oriented, and helpful, focuses on general views, broad themes, and feelings, decentralizes decision making, develops few rules and regulations. That's kind of the way that I led, a little bit more intuitive. And I would do the more sensation thinking as opposed to intuitive thinking. So, just two interesting aspects. Emotions. An emotion is obviously, we all know that emotions play into a lot of different things that we do. And we talked about the rider and the elephant being the emotion. Emotion drives us. Emotion is not a bad thing. And emotion is going to be present. It's just our ability to regulate and be aware of our emotions and control them to some extent that will benefit us as leaders and managers. So, an emotion is a mental state that arises spontaneously within a person based on interactions with the environment rather than through conscious effort and is often accompanied by physiological changes or sensations. So, we feel the emotion in our body. We get tense, or we can't smile, or we even drop to our knees when we hear bad news, uh, or we jump up and down when we're excited. Our emotions lead to a physiological response. Emotional contagion. This is a great one to understand in other people and certainly yourself. It's the tendency of people to absorb and express the emotions, moods, and attitudes of those around them. So if we're leaders or managers, we have to be aware. There's a great book called The Energy Bus of how our emotions impact others. Because if we come in sort of downtrodden, a little bit solemn, a little bit slumber oriented, we have to expect that our team is going to see that and could potentially slow down their ambition as well. If we are constantly excited about the next new thing and we are encouraging and positive, research shows that productivity will increase if the leader has positive emotions. Even if anyone has positive emotions, they tend to be more productive and they tend to be more they have more provision. They succeed more in life with positive emotions. There's a whole research study about happiness and positivity and gratitude and how these things can truly impact our lives and some of the ways people perceive us and some of the ways people interact around us. Negativity biases is a term used to describe how the human mind reacts more quickly and strongly to perceived bad things than it does to good things. They had an interesting challenge in the NFL for a certain team. They would fine players $100 every time they dropped a pass or missed a block or missed their assignment during the video review of the tape. So they would watch the game afterwards, and every time they would see that, they would fine a player for not doing what they were supposed to doing. So that loss of $100 motivated them more than the actual gain of something else. So the loss, the negativity, we sit on that emotionally a lot more. Negative people and events have a disproportionately large effect on our emotions and moods, and that negative emotions also tend to spread more easily than positive ones. It's a shame, but it's true. So, the energy bus, joy is the driver of the bus. We treat others with respect. We don't like energy vampires, people who suck energy from us, the constant negative complainers, gossipers. These tend to be, according to the literature, people that we should avoid and people that we certainly don't want to be because we could drag down the effectiveness of our team. Here's some positive emotions versus negative emotions. Some examples of negative emotions would be anger, fright, anxiety, guilt, shame, sadness, jealousy, envy, and disgust. There's a interesting movie, forget the name of it, that my daughter watches, and they have these characters. They actually have positive and negative emotions, and they journey throughout this movie, and they teach some of the between the ages of 4 and 8 years old about these emotions. But those are negative emotions. Here are positive emotions: happiness, joy, pride, love, affection, and relief. I mean, even when you say those out loud, happiness, joy, pride, love, affection, and relief. positive emotions. You can almost experience them when you speak them. And so, where does your mind go to? Does it go to sadness, guilt, shame, fright, anger, jealousy, disgust? That would be the negative emotional side. And then the positive emotional side, does your mind go to joy, happiness, pride, love, affection, relief? These are important things to understand about emotions in ourselves and those around us. The four basic components of emotional intelligence. I did a lot of research on this in my doctoral program. And the four quadrants, which you really look at, are self-awareness, which we talked a ton about. Who am I? What is my effect on others in this environment? Where are my blind spots? Taking those, getting feedback, taking those self-assessments, understanding your strengths and weaknesses. That's self-awareness. When we are self-aware, we automatically resort into the second emotional intelligence quadrant, which is self-management. How do we regulate ourselves? How do we have discipline? How do we behave? How can we manage how can we take our self-awareness into self-management? And then social awareness. How about others around us? What experiences, what emotions are they experiencing? What perceptions could they maybe have? How could I understand them better? Social awareness. And then you have relationship management. High social awareness tends to lead more into good times to interview with a friend, good time to tell a friend, give them a call, let them know what's going on, and be able to manage relationships, which is a huge, I don't want to say problem, but a lot of people don't know how to do that. And it causes a lot of pain in their life when they don't know how to do that. So emotional intelligence is really important. Again, the four basic components of it are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. And we want to make sure we get good at all of these because a person with high emotional intelligence is known to be able to perform better than those with low emotional intelligence. Also, they're probably more fun to be around, and they're probably more of a blessing to people's lives because of their high emotional intelligence. So, self management, the ability to engage in self regulation, thoughts, and behaviors to accomplish all your tasks and handle difficult and challenging situations. Clarity of mind, big one. If we don't have clarity of mind before we try to accomplish a task, before I started talking through this presentation, it would be a lot harder for me to be able to execute on this study here. So is my mind clear as I look at my phone to see what time it is? Clarity of objectives. Do I know what I'm doing and why I'm doing it? An organized system for self-management. Steps to getting organized: empty your head, decide the next action you want to take, get organized, perform a weekly review, and then just do it. Stress and resilience. This is what we're going to end on here, but stress is a real thing. Stress can captivate us, it can crush us, it can bring us, to bad places, but stress isn't always a bad thing. A little bit of stress, there's an amount that is actually good for us and it moves us to action. So stress is an individual's psychological and emotional response to external stimuli that create physical and psychological demands that exceed the individual's knowledge, abilities, or resources when important outcomes are at stake. So a stressful event is saying, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm equipped. It's too much. There's a lot at stake here, and I'm stressed about it. A stressor is a stimuli that produces a combination of frustration and anxiety. And resilience is really the capacity to persevere and to bounce back from adversity, conflict, and failure. And stress threats in an organizational environment, too much stress causes a lot of unwanted behaviors. So we have to look at the health of our organization. Do we have leaders who are self-aware? Do we trust them? Are they high on emotional intelligence? Do we understand personalities? And these are all factors that contribute to a stressful or a healthy organizational environment. And then there's people who are stressed out that are at work are sometimes not good. There's something called presenteeism, meaning people who go to work but are too stressed out and too distracted to be productive. And that's a real thing. And a threat to stress is stress that is counterproductive. It's creating anxiety in other people, and it's counterproductive work behavior. It's not a good thing. You can see that there are areas in which just managing stress and being able to know that no stress means you're probably not doing much. A decent amount of stress means, hey, you're good, you're operating in a good zone here. And then there's really an optimal amount of stress that you feel like your skill set and your resources that you have, you can handle this. And then once it becomes too much, you sign up for too many activities, you're in too many different types of relationships, you're overcommitted, you become exhausted and stress becomes a negative thing. And stress in the work environment, a healthy organization versus a stressful organization, there's something called role ambiguity. People are unclear about the task or behavior that's expected from them. So if you're not sure what's expected from you and you're in an environment you don't know how to act, that's a stressful situation. Also, role conflict occurs when an individual faces incompatible demands, meaning I'm doing this, but I also have to do this. I'm a husband and I'm trying to work and earn a lot of money here, but when I come home, I still have to take care of the baby and I have to do all of these different things, and it's become stressful, and it becomes stressful on those around us as well. So I may get into more arguments with my wife, or I may have some bitterness inside of me if I experience role conflict. And so there's task demands and there's interpersonal demands as well. So task demands are stressors arising from the tasks required of a person holding a particular job, and interpersonal demands are stressors associated with relationships in the organization. And I'm sure we can understand our task demands is, can I get enough done here? And that interpersonal demands is, can I get enough done here? But am I going to be able to get along with the people that I'm working with? And what is my role? Am I supposed to help them? Am I not supposed to help them? So we're going to end on some interesting techniques to alleviate stress and to be able to take everything we just learned and understanding ourselves, understanding some of the people around us, uh, hopefully being high on emotional intelligence to know when we're too stressed or when we're at our optimum point of performance based on that good amount of stress. We want to seek and destroy key sources of stress. We want to find meaning and support. We want to meditate and manage our energy. We want to find what we call work-life balance, and factors that managers can apply to protect and enhance the well-being of individuals is provide social support and give employees more control over their jobs, empower them a little bit more. Simple meditation. If we feel stressed out, find a quiet place where we won't be distracted, sit upright in a comfortable chair, close our eyes, relax our body, bring our full focus to our breathing. And don't try to control your breathing. Just breathe naturally while focusing your attention on your inhaling and exhaling. And do this for 10 minutes and do it often when you're stressed out, and learn how to breathe and focus on one thing and clear your mind and be good leaders and good managers. Hopefully, this first segment, as we dive into the content of leadership, was helpful. Again, our we talked about knowing ourselves. We talked about personality. We talked about emotional intelligence. We talked about some external and internal factors to stress. And this is all of these components. Being able to master this and understand these concepts will help us become better leaders. Because remember, as Craig Groeschel says, as the leader gets better, everyone gets better. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you all later.